Screening as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival is a film called Fire at Sea. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of the film, David Jenkins, and the writer of the book and of the story of the film, Kathryn Spurling. Welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thanks,
Well,
Peter.
thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Great to talk to you both. And this is such an intriguing documentary about the 1998 Westralia, HMAS Westralia ship disaster. How did the film come about?
Well, as you've mentioned, I wrote the book. Um, I was motivated by doing that because the midshipman who died in the engine room was an acquaintance of mine from my teaching, and I didn't like the way the Navy Board of Inquiry had not only made those who actually were responsible uh, to be excused, but the fact that they blamed Megan Pelly, the midshipman Megan Pelly, for her own death. And I was annoyed about that. So I wrote the book, and nothing ever changed. So I found this beleaguered filmmaker who would work on the subject because he I believed in the story, and the two of us decided, what the heck, we couldn't get funding. We decided to do it ourselves, and it was a 3-year journey. I wrote the script. David did all the techo stuff, and that's how we managed to get the documentary up.
Well, congratulations on that, because it really is a
Yeah,
fascinating
so
insight. Yeah. Go on, David. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Oh, look, I am belatedly into film and so ordinarily I wouldn't have really kind of attempted I guess because it ended up being a feature film, and so we started really with the idea of doing a short film, and I think that was kind of within my ability. And so, but it kind of, we discovered pretty early on that there was, uh, my sort of sentiment is that this film is kind of more like a closing of a sad chapter for the family. So I would usually do sort of fairly uplifting stories, trying to avoid any kind of anything overly maybe critical, right? So it was a little bit of a departure for me, but it has helped so much in my understanding of film and, I guess television and storytelling and just all the facets of film production that had kind of previously really escaped me, like the dilemma between, I guess making something that's watchable, but also making it kind of appeal to film festivals potentially, and obviously the audience, and trying to sort of compete with all these, demands of, like really wanting to do something I felt for the family as well. And Kathryn, I think.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The survivors, some of them had not been allowed to tell their stories. And so the interviews that we got, they actually sort of grew, and we finished up with 4 hours of interviews, which we had to get down into a marketable shape, which took 9 edits. And I think David and I finally just said, we don't care how big it is anymore. We cannot do this again, because the Megan Kelly's parents were interviewed tearfully. A survivor was interviewed tearfully. I mean, two actually survivors were interviewed tearfully. So for them, they hadn't had the chance to tell their stories, and they felt it was cathartic to be able to do that in a film version. So we finished up finding we were really working for them to tell their stories. I don't like the word closure, but that's what it meant for a lot of them. And they're coming to, quite a few are coming to the filming. So we feel quite uh, grateful for their experience, that they trusted us to tell their stories.
Mm.
And it is such an interesting story. I mean, I obviously didn't know much about it, there's certainly some intriguing revelations in the film, and it's great that you're able to tell this story, which is what a good documentary does do. I noticed that also in the film there's a bit of use of sort of animation, some recreations, models, photos, all sorts of things. Tell me about putting all of those things together in the film.
Yeah. Well, Kathryn got approval from Navy. Actually, I guess in a way it was, the Navy learned a lot from this. My understanding
Yeah.
is that they really transformed.
If I could just interrupt for a moment,
Yeah.
I am ex-Navy.
Yeah.
I married Navy. My son was ex-Navy. So I had some ins into Navy history, and I have written quite a few books on naval history. So the Navy did learn from their big mistakes. So they did move forward. But back in 1998, there were too many mistakes made. But the animation and all the fancy techo stuff was entirely David's.
And that was one of the wonderful learnings. So with the sort of vintage of, the photography and I guess the kind of media records, from the news, it was all pretty sort of low resolution. There was a lot of the photos, I guess, were taken on, like the old sort of 35 mil disposable almost cameras. There weren't really professional forensic type photos, right, of the actual engine room. And so it made it really difficult to kind of tell a story. And pretty early on, I thought, we might be able to sort of animate some of this, maybe with a kind of blueprint or somehow just demonstrate, what happened in a way that made it a little bit clearer than just the description. So all the crew were amazing in the way that they were able to describe what happened, but it's quite a complex space. The engine room itself was extremely complicated. I don't know if you could really describe it that well, and if you could, it would take someone quite a while to carefully, explain how it was structured. And so, and even so I got one of my part-timers, Josh Watts, to kind of develop the ship as a model. And it was, it was a little bit of an engineering kind of activity because it needed to be quite accurate, obviously, or very accurate. A lot of the people who were watching the film are very particular people, like engineers or, Navy warrant officers, and they really know the space. And look, it wasn't, at the end of the day, it wasn't a perfect representation, and we've tried to, explain that. However, it's pretty close. We used the blueprints from which we got from the Navy Historical Association, and they were very good. They supplied blueprints by digital file, and with those blueprints, which are still it's quite confusing even to try and interpret those on, 3, 4, 5 levels. But yeah, we did that. That was mainly down to Josh. After Josh had finished building it out, I kind of reviewed it, and we sort of moved a few things around here and there, and then we animated it. And I remember when I dropped in some of the visual effects, once it had been kind of modeled, thanks to Josh again, when I started sort of dropping in the actual lighting and visual effects and the smoke and then the fire, and it was actually, I remember when I was looking at the preview of the animation while I was sort of mucking around with the effects, I sort of gasped, and because the lighting, was quite haunting, and the way that it's a high pressure fuel leak on fire, and the animation, look, it just really brought it to life, with the caveat that it wasn't, exactly precise, but it was pretty close. And
Yeah, it was an ex-anchor which the Navy was using as a replenishment ship. It should never have been purchased. And then the illegal hoses were put on by an unqualified contractor. And of course, when the ship went to sea, the engines were brought up to full power and they burst. And there were 4 people in the engine room and they tragically died. They're all under 27 years of age. So, you know, as David said, there's no way we could have got that impression of how terrifying that must have been for these people without the animation that he cleverly put in. And the last 2 people out we interviewed, and they just couldn't even describe just how horrific that fire was. It was so bad that fire parties couldn't go in to find the people who were still in the engine room.
And what I noticed the learning, Peter, and it's such a nice experience, because I one of the main learnings that I got from this whole process was just how an idea kind of evolves and grows almost like a living thing, that it sort of with respectful collaboration, it can be a little bit confusing, but with the evolving kind of ideas, it really and then the voiceover and the animation and Josh and the blueprints and the photos and Kathryn's writing, it really took on a life of its own, and it was quite moving. I remember when I finished the last edit, and I was so exhausted, and I was watching it, and I had a glass of wine. I had tears streaming down my face because I was so exhausted, but so enmeshed with the story, and I felt like I knew these.
Yeah, I haven't been able to watch the last one. I had, after 9 edits, I was just too emotionally, because having done the interviews with the survivors and the parents and knowing the story intimately, I just could not look at that last one that David has sent me. So when I see it in Melbourne, it's going to be the first time I've seen that final edit as well.
Yeah, so it was,
it's an emotional story.
For a first time feature, I learnt so much.
Yeah, we were going to make a short film.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not this massive mock.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, I saw in a press release you sent out or whatever that it was originally a 2-hour film, and what we're seeing at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, and what I saw is an 83-minute version. So getting the edit right, as you said, it's gone through a number of edits. Quite an experience deciding what stays, what goes.
Peter, we had 4 hours of interviews,
Yeah.
and everything that was said in those interviews was worth listening to. But we realised that was ridiculous, so we just kept chipping away. But as we've just said, 9 edits. I couldn't look at it again, and nor could David. And we just said, right, whatever it is, it is.
Mm.
And it turned up to be 1.23.
Yeah. No, I understand. So, the people who've been interviewed in your documentary in Fire at Sea, have they seen it and responded to the film?
They have not seen the final edit. We did send a couple. There's only one person who's seen the final edit. So I think they too just wanted to leave it alone until we had finished. And there was only one person who has been very emotionally disturbed by the whole thing. He asked to see the whole thing, his whole interview. But otherwise, we've been very reluctant to show it to them. It's going to be very emotional for them at the screening, because they are coming. So the answer to that question is no. I don't think too many have seen the final edit.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah. I was going to ask you about yeah. Okay. Well, their reactions will be very interesting at the screening. The Navy. I think you mentioned this. The Navy has learned from the experience, or haven't they? Have things changed?
part of the tendering. They perfected their tendering processes. It wasn't closely watched and was open to fraudulent activity, which was what happened. So they did perfect. They put in new governments, which has changed it tremendously. Which I was very pleased to see, because that's why I said my son was an engineering officer on submarines. So the Navy learnt from that, and they brought in closer looking at the whole process, because before it was allowed that one person could give it to another person to give it to another person without actually being properly policed. And this is what happened. So we've got, we hope, something to keep people safe who are serving in the Navy now.
Yeah. And your documentary has certainly contributed to that, and the book, of course, quite extensively, to making things better in the future, because you don't want a situation like this happening again.
No, 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 no. We don't want to have to make a feature film like this again.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was quite inspired by so I actually accidentally met I didn't even really know who he was, but I was at a media like dinner at the War Memorial for correspondence, and I was kind of interested in the documentary stuff. I enjoy history, and so I went there, and I was chatting with a gentleman, suit, and his wife, and we were chatting for half an hour, or probably more, about the Westralia and the film. And as I was kind of, the rest of the evening transpired, I sort of discovered, so it was actually the Chief of Navy. He was just wearing a plain suit with a little, AO badge or whatever, the little sort of gold pin, and just, but he was so good, and so sort of seemed like, that as sad as all the events were, that there has been like a lot of soul searching, I'm sure, and I wouldn't know at that level. I guess that there's so much that goes on, hard work, and that sense of responsibility and personal kind of ownership of these events. But look, so yeah, look, I don't know exactly, but I'll go with Kathryn's sort of understanding of it, and just from that one experience, which was very, very in hindsight, I found it quite really encouraging, and I think that sort of transparency hopefully will result in a better organization, and it's that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, because there's never a criticism of the people who served, because we honor those whoever serves in any of the military forces.
Yep.
I completely say thank you very much. It was just the safeguarding of the mechanisms that did not keep them safe, and that's why we felt this was necessary.
Okay. Well, look, well done on the film. It really was fascinating, and I learnt so much from it. I must ask you both, Kathryn, first of all, are you working on other books or projects at the moment?
I am. I'm doing my 12th book,
Oh,
and it's and it's the hardest one I've ever written. It's the history of women in the Australian Defence Force,
ah,
and that, yeah, and that is a really hard book to write, because we've come a long way, and there were some difficult chapters in the progression of women going through integration into the military. So I'll be glad when it's over.
I'm sure. And then, of course, it will be made into a documentary.
No.
We've learned so much, and I'm glad you're laughing, because I think it's just so important for people to recognize, like, I had no idea what we were getting into, and actually, but with all that sort of difficulty and adversity, and what we've learned. And I think, that I would really love to work with Kathryn on another film. But I think because we've got this experience, which was really challenging, we would kind of have that wisdom to apply to in any kind of next project. But yeah, I would absolutely. I went in more or less completely blind to all the massive amounts of work. And yeah.
And I've been told I write sad books because I do include these catastrophes and dilemmas that people face. But what inspires me to keep writing these books is the human spirit is just so extraordinary that it can get through these most amazing challenges and grow and prosper. And these women I'm interviewing now and the people we interviewed, they have some of them turned their lives into the most extraordinary experiences from tragedy. And that's what keeps me going anyway.
Okay, great to hear that. And so, David, you don't have any other particular projects on the go, or anything else you want to do, or films, or anything?
Well, not really. I'm working on a on a letters from Kokoda short film. So I
Ah,
fairly regularly sort of work on that when I'm not doing. So it's sort of like a passion project, and you're just putting really. I suppose a proof of concept. So having letters that have been archived that are quite open and honest, and many of them are written by young men on the front lines who are obviously deeply in a state of real jeopardy, and you can kind of sense the longing for comforts of home and their young wives and families, and then the letters back to the track, Kokoda track, where young women are expressing similar kind of sentiments, and then interspersed with some of the cost of conflict. So there are letters written by young women describing how their cheerful, happy-go-lucky husbands have transformed into, really, it wasn't called PTSD, but those sorts of um, problems. And actually, as a proof of concept, it's quite moving. I haven't really this time round. I think I'm being a little bit more cautious with how I put the whole thing together. So rather than complete it and then try and get support, I'm just going to put a proof of concept and see, maybe I can get someone to sort of help out with that. But that's the only thing. I really do a lot of commercial, just the standard communications and marketing stuff, which I enjoy. So that's I think that's what most filmmakers do. They traditionally, at least my understanding is, they do a film that they love, really meaningful, and then they spend a lot of their other time just trying to pay the bills with a second job, or doing communications and marketing. Yeah.
absolutely. No, that all sounds good. Great to talk to you both. We've been speaking to Kathryn Spurling, the writer, and David Jenkins, the director of Fire at Sea, about the 1998 Westralia ship disaster, and screening at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. Thank you so much, both of you, for talking with me.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Peter.
Peter.
Yeah, much appreciated. And I look forward to being a regular commenter on your YouTube channel. And so thank you again for the opportunity. That was our first experience of doing this whole promotional type thing as well. So it's all just wonderful to learn. So much appreciated.
Excellent to hear. Well done. Thanks so much. All the best. Bye bye.
Thanks, Peter. Take care.